In a world that glorifies self-promotion, self-importance, self-advancement, Dhul Hijjah stands as a profound counterpoint. Nowhere is this more visible than in the simplicity of ihram, those unstitched clothes that transform princes and paupers into indistinguishable pilgrims before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so every year, millions enter the sacred state of ihram. CEOs and janitors of the same company, celebrities and unknown individuals, the wealthy and the impoverished, all stripped of worldly markers and constructs of status and distinction. No designer clothing to signal wealth, no uniforms to indicate your rank. There's no outward sign to separate the privileged from the marginalized. The Prophet ﷺ reminded us in his final sermon, Ya ayyuhan nas, ala inna rabbakum wahid. O mankind, your Lord is one. And then he continued and he said something that today seems so profound to nations that took so long to understand equity and equality. He said, and your father is one, Adam alayhi salam. The Prophet ﷺ reminded that large congregation at the end of his life, an Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab over an Arab, nor someone who is black over someone who is white and someone who is white over someone who is black, except through their action, their taqwa. So there's a tangible reality you experience during Hajj. But this equality, this equity through ihram, it's the beginning of ego sacrifice. As pilgrims start to do tawaf around the Kaaba, they physically center their existence around something greater than themselves. As people stand shoulder to shoulder in prayer, the boundaries between your individual identity begin to dissolve into a collective purpose and a congregational prayer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me. Worship, ibadah, means recognizing our true position in this universe, in the cosmic hierarchy. Not as the center of our own universe, but as servants of the one who created all universes. Look at the world today. We live in the age of selfies, personal brand, the influencer status. Social media platforms, for many people, they've become virtual marketplaces where we package and we promote ourselves. From carefully curated profiles, strategic self-promotion, we're constantly encouraged to center ourselves, amplify ourselves, prioritize ourselves. Even activism sometimes is performative. It's more about being seen doing good than actually showing up and doing good in person. And what of our ummah today? Our community has not been immune to this ego epidemic. We've seen religious knowledge sometimes become a pathway to celebrity or status or platform rather than real service. Sometimes we witness charitable acts that focus more on the giver than the recipient, on the one who is showing rather than the one who is receiving, on the system itself that needs to be changed. Sometimes people talk about the most oppressed, but it's a platform, and the platform is for the one who is performing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, Inna akramakum inda Allahi atqakum. The most honorable amongst you are those who have taqwa. So in the sight of Allah, it's your taqwa. How often do we seek nobility in the eyes of people versus in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The ego sacrifice of Hajj reminds us that true liberation begins with being freed from ourselves, endless self-concern, constant self-reference, persistent self-importance. So when pilgrims stand at Arafah, they don't stand alone. They stand as part of a vast community united in purpose. When they stone the Jamrat, they're not merely performing a ritual. They're symbolically rejecting all that stands between themselves and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it begins with getting rid of your ego. Think about this at a very personal level. At Hajj and Umrah every year, but especially at Hajj, you meet a lot of people with very, very, very prominent backgrounds. A very wealthy businessman, for example. Identity for him is all around his wealth, his connections, his business empire, and his influence. And he said, what I found remarkable is in a state of ihram, for the first time, I actually feel more free. I feel like I'm not attached to that identity. And what's amazing is after Hajj, he started anonymously supporting a number of causes. He felt this was helpful for him. Rather than focusing on the names of people, on buildings and recognition and being recognized for your philanthropy, he felt more free in a very spiritual sense. So his transformation tells us what we are learning and emphasizing. When you sacrifice ego, you're not diminishing yourself. You're in fact making meaningful change, life's purpose. And in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and whoever is protected from the stinginess of the soul, they are those who have success. They are the successful ones. وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ. So the stinginess of the soul here, it's not just about material references, material resources. It's about holding tightly to recognition, praise, self-importance. Think about the Arabic word that we use all the time for these sacrificial animals, Eid al-Adha, the Udhiyah, derived from the same word that refers to the morning time, al-duha, the same root word. It's the ego diminishment here, but it's actually the dawn, the morning of something new. What if this sacrifice that you're commemorating and putting forth, what if this is something that elevates you? The willingness of Ibrahim alayhi salam to sacrifice Ismail, his son, represents not just the sacrifice of a loved one, but the sacrifice of future legacy and hope. And of course, we want to protect our ego. We want to protect ourselves. So think about what Ibrahim alayhi salam did, what we commemorate, and when you sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, think about the outcome. How amazing is one's life from a spiritual lens in this world and a material and spiritual lens in the next life, if in this world their ego comes second, meaning their focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. Ibrahim alayhi salam is teaching us that it's not just about the sparing of the son, but rather an eternal symbol of a legacy that would outlast him. So, practical application. How do we make ego sacrifices? How do we make ego sacrifices? Something that is easy, something that is consistent, practicing what we take from ihram as well. So first, practice anonymous giving. It's not always about being recognized, although both are permissible. But practice as much as you can, being very sincere and private with your charity and your acts of worship that other people should not have access to. Yes, rarely do you find that it's needed to inspire and motivate others. But on the Day of Judgment, one of the groups of people that are shaded is the one who gave so secretly. They didn't want others to know. So secretly, for the sake of Allah. Number 2, intentionally center others in your daily conversations. So think about how many times people say I, me, I did. Number 3, seek roles of service as much as you can, rather than only roles of authority. And number 4, regularly expose yourself to environments where the status markers are irrelevant or invisible. It removes some of the ego dependence. And finally, when you receive praise, direct it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Direct it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Brothers and sisters, the ritual ego sacrifices of Dhul Hijjah invites us to a revolutionary act. Step out of the spotlight so that truth itself can be illuminated. There's a world around us that's obsessed with self-promotion. You imagine the power of a community that is connected to self-effacement and service of something greater. In a global context where Muslims sometimes are marginalized, imagine the strength we could marshal if we redirected that energy that we spend on eternal status, internal competition towards collective elevation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises us, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who strive for us, meaning for Allah, we will surely guide them to our ways. Promise of Allah. Today, the Ummah faces a number of different challenges and hardships, and therefore also opportunities. Persecution in some lands, discrimination in others, oppression in multiple regions and forms. Old and young, men and women from every ethnicity and walk of life could be affected. In this critical moment, we can't afford the price of ego. We can't waste energy on personal platforms while our community is bleeding. We cannot prioritize individual recognition in a selfish way while our people are suffering a collective erasure. And in fact, the garments of ihram, they call us to revolutionary humility, where we become so empty of self that we can be filled with divine purpose. We become so free of personal agenda that we can finally focus on the community needs and the mission itself and the message that's spreading. So today I ask you, what aspect of your ego requires sacrifice? Is it a need for recognition? Is it an attachment to comfort, a pursuit of status? What might become possible for you, for the ummah, for humanity, if you stood before Allah on the Day of Judgment with no ego, like the pilgrim in Ihram? The revolution begins not just with changing others, but with sacrificing the false self that stands in between. It stands between you and authentic service to the truth. We ask Allah to accept and to remove from us any kind of pride or ego. Allahumma ameen.